Welcome to the Teachers Impact Podcast, or better yet known as The Tip, where teachers can come to master their craft, use their voice, and enhance student learning. This episode will be talking about managing diverse learning needs to meet your students' academic goals. This episode is going to give you some strategies and some tips for handling students who are far below or above grade level, so make sure to stay tuned. The first thing when managing diverse learning needs is to come to an acceptance and a realization. When I say acceptance and realization, early on in my career, another veteran teacher said to me, make the best of the cards that you're dealt. And at first I thought she was talking about something else when she said it to me. But when she explained herself, she said to me, the kids that you get are the kids that you get. So you're going to make the best of those students in your classroom. You cannot control which students you're going to get, so you have to make the best of it. And it has really stuck with me throughout my career. Acceptance, it means that you're going to have to make the best of the students that you have in your classroom. The reality is you're going to have students who are sometimes 2 or more grade levels behind. Is this a good thing? No. Do we wish as teachers that we would all our students will come to us on grade level? Yes. But it is part of our responsibility is to accept these students and see it as one of our goals and our responsibility to help them move forward no matter how they come to us. This is something that's hard to come to, but once you come to it, once you have the acceptance and the realization and you accept the reality of the students that are in your class, it will make your life so much easier. And it has made my life so much easier. So sometimes, there are times when I think I'm not even sure what to do with this child in my classroom because I've gotten certain kids and I'm like, wow, but again, it's my responsibility and I have to figure out ways and strategies to help them learn and to help them grow. The second part of this episode we're going to be talking about is finding and executing those strategies to help these students. So, first step, coming to an acceptance and a realization. Second step is finding and executing strategies. One of the tips that I have for you is pairing students together. And when we pair students together, we have to be strategic about it. So, usually we're told to pair high students and low students. But what happens when we pair high students and low students is both of them are going to get frustrated because they're too far apart on the spectrum, for lack of a better word. So, one of the things that I've done and one of the things that you can do is to pair your intermediate student with your remedial student or your low students with your medium students. So that way it's a little bit more even and the student who's helping the remedial student or lower level student can get far more of an impact helping them because they're more closer to that student's level. And the student who is lower or remedial, they're going to be taught the concept in a way that's more easier for them to understand. So that's one strategy. The second strategy is to identify those student strengths. So, for example, you may have a student who is very low in reading, but in math, they're excellent. So I know in the back of my mind, I know that during my math block, I'm going to be making sure that that student is attempting or trying to read certain words during the math block. I keep it in the back of my mind to use that student's strength to help him in the other area that he or she may be struggling in. The third strategy is to make the best of your whole group instruction. I know nowadays, everything is center-based learning, individualized learning. Yes, those are all things that we need to incorporate in our classroom and they're very important. But I also want to emphasize the importance of whole group instruction. Whole group instruction is a time where you can reach all of your students at one time. You can also differentiate in whole group instruction. So, for example, during whole group instruction, you may be working on sight words, reading sentences, however the whatever the topic may be. During whole group instruction, you're making sure that each and every single student is paying attention. And when I say each and every single student is paying attention, that means your high students and your low students and the students in the middle. You're making sure that they're engaged, staying focused, and on task during whole group instruction. Because during whole group instruction is when you're providing the students with the meat of the content, might I say. Once you're teaching the most important parts of the content, you're looking and you're evaluating who is understanding, who's getting it, who's answering the questions, who's engaged. And if you see those low students or those high students not engaged, you can call on those students to make sure that they understand the content that you're trying to teach, particularly in whole group instruction. So, for example, you may be working on a sight word. That's just an easy example to use. So, for example, you may be working on the sight words. You can still, in your whole group instruction, you can say, okay, this group, you're going to read these set of words. The second group, you're going to read these set of words. And the third group, you're going to read these set of words. You can change the words based on the groups during your whole group instruction. Again, it's still whole group instruction, but you're differentiating in whole group instruction. That is one more tip that will help you to reach those far below and far above. Whole group instruction, not only whole group instruction, but differentiating during whole group instruction, where that is the time where you can get all of your students, you can get the best bang for your buck. The other tip is lesson planning. And when I say lesson planning, I mean the plan after the lesson. So you have your main lesson plans that you sat down, you typed it up, you looked at the curriculum, you looked at the standards. That's great. But after you plan your lesson, you should have in the back of your mind, how are you going to reach those students? So for every activity that you have planned, how are you going to reach the low student, the medium student, and the high student during your whole group, during your individual, during your small group? How are you going to reach those students? What targeted activities are you going to do to reach those students? So you have the standards laid out in your lesson plan. You have the standards laid out in your lesson plan. You have to make sure that the activities that you have planned really target those kids at every level. Sometimes we forget that and we did our lesson plan, we're done, but we always have to have that in the back of our mind. Sometimes what I will do is I will write down on a post-it note just so I can remember for myself exactly what I'm going to do for each group. I write it down in a notebook, on a sticky note, whatever I have available at that time, what I'm going to be doing for each group during whole group, small group, and individual. The fourth thing that you're going to do to help you manage those diverse learning needs is your classroom is using data. And I talked about it in 2 of my previous podcast episodes where I talked about differentiated instruction, how important data is. So there's 2 types of data that we need to use. We need to use qualitative data and we need to use quantitative data to help these students with diverse learning needs. Qualitative data are the experiences, your observations that you're having in the classroom with these students. Quantitative data are your numbers, so their tests, their scores. Okay. You're going to use those 2 types of data. We cannot just depend on one type of data, quantitative, because it's not going to share the true picture. Okay, so we have to use the qualitative and the quantitative. Part of the qualitative data is looking at your students' strengths, their weaknesses, their home environments, and their dreams. For example, I had a student, she very intelligent student. She does very well in math, excellent thinker, excellent problem solver, but at certain points she would have these behavior issues. So every couple of weeks she would be acting out, then she would go back to her normal self. So I had to really look at what was going on, because I noticed that the behavior was affecting her schoolwork. This student's home environment was a really tough situation. It was really hard for me. So the way I found out about her situation, because after after she had an episode where she was acting out, not listening, not doing what she was supposed to do. Before after I brought the students downstairs, I brought her back up to the class and I sat her down and we had lunch together, and I asked her, I said, what's going on with you, Laura? And I said I asked her, I said, what's going on with you? And she started crying and she didn't really want to talk about it, but I gave her a couple of minutes, and she said, she's having some trouble with a family member at home. And she didn't quite put it that way, but I'm not sure if I can say it on a podcast. But she was just going through a really, really tough time. And I said, wow, I didn't know, all of this was going on. So I did refer her to the counselor. But from then on, she came back to her normal self. And so after this conversation, it was a little bit easier to reach her. So she was a little bit more excited, to learn, because she was very intelligent, very bright, far above grade level student, or far above the content student, excellent in math. So she's one of the students that I had to challenge her. And I noticed that when I tried to, give her more rigorous work, I tried to challenge her. It wasn't so much of a struggle anymore. Yes, was it still a struggle, but it wasn't so much of a struggle. And I say all that to say that we just don't know what's going on in students' households. So we can look at quantitative data, we can look at the numbers, we can look at tests, but at the end of the day, we also need to take into consideration what's going on with students outside of those numbers. And this just made me realize as a teacher that we cannot just use the numbers. Are the numbers important? Yes, but we have to take the whole child into consideration. And this student, she's doing really well. She still comes to me, she talks to me. Even though she's not in my class anymore, she moved on to the upper grades. But I wanted to make sure I reached her as a student, and I felt that I did, because at first I was looking at her classwork, I was looking at her qualitative data, but at the end of the day, it came down to something else for me to be able to reach her so that she could do her best work in class, and she could meet her growth targets. The fifth tip is to have compassion for yourself and your students. So, it's very hard for us teachers. Sometimes we have maybe 20 to 30 kids in our classrooms, and it's a difficult job, to say the least. Difficult does not even explain what us teachers do on a daily basis. So we have to be compassionate with ourselves, telling ourselves that we're doing the best that we can. Be compassionate with ourselves, because at the end of the day, if we're beating up on ourselves, telling ourselves that we're not doing a good job, and all that stuff, is the job is going to be even harder. And I wanted to share the experience of me returning to the classroom. So in this district, I'm in the classroom as of this moment, but before I came to this district, I was outside of the classroom. I was in a more instructional coaching role, supervisory, and I was very hard on myself because I had the expectation that, I had to be the best. I had to make sure that my students were well behaved all the time. I had to make sure that they met all their growth targets. I had to make sure, but I had to tell myself it's okay. Not it's okay if, my students aren't doing well, or if my students are, not following rules, or not okay in the terms of like behavior management, or not okay in the terms of like not meeting growth targets or anything like that, but okay in the sense of I'm doing the best that I can with the resources that I have, with the talent that I have as a teacher. I'm coming in there, I'm doing the best that I can every day. The only thing I can think to myself is, okay, how can I make the next day better? What could I do differently to make the next day better? Or what did I do well today that I want to carry on to the next day? So having that compassion means recognizing yourself as a teacher and as a human being, and knowing that you're doing the best that you can. You can work to improve and you can work to get better, but you're doing your best, giving yourself the compassion, knowing that you're doing your best. Okay, so now we're at the key takeaways from this episode. Number 1, accept and make the best of the students you have. Number 2, identify and use student strengths to boost their confidence. Number 3, use data to tailor strategies for student success. Number 4, be compassionate with yourself and your students. Number 5 is I encourage you to try some of the strategies that we talked about in this episode, and it will help you to meet those students with diverse learning needs in your classroom. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check out the website, teachersimpact.net. If you found this content helpful, please share, favorite, and rate on your favorite podcast app. It helps the show to grow, reach more teachers, and have an impact. You can email me at teachersimpacteducation@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram at teachersimpactpodcast.